And so today we have Claudia Price, who is, we were trying to figure out, Claudia, we're trying to figure out what her title should be. And I think this was the closest thing we could come up with. And just to give you an all kind of a history, if you don't mind, Claudia and I went to high school together. We're best friends in high school. And we both started out as bank tellers at 18 years old. And so I went the college route, and Claudia will share with how she did it, but she worked her way up, who doesn't have a college degree but has lots of certifications and that kind of thing she'll talk about, and has worked her way up to be now working with an engineering firm. So I'm going to go ahead and have Claudia introduce herself and talk a little about your path and what you do, start with your background and all that.
Okay. My name is Claudia Price. I work for an engineering firm in the Southern California area. We also have an office in Tucson and another one in Salt Lake City, and we have offices in Northern California. So I manage the network for the entire organization. I also get involved with move projects. So I plan the cabling, the security, the phones, all of that. And then I also get involved with the vendors and having them, do the installs. So I kind of, once I started taking over the network for the company, I kind of started building it up and started making it my network. And it was really different coming from a systems background to start thinking in terms of the network, because you look at things differently. But as far as my background before working for the company that I work for now, which I've been there since 2005, I started out as a bank teller, as Adrian said, and I kind of just worked my way up to operations officer. And when I was 27, so when I was 27, I actually transitioned into IT, and it wasn't like a normal transition. Back then, IT was kind of new, having an IT person in a bank, instead of having everything just farmed out. So I was the operations officer, but then they needed somebody to be able to work and create these reports and everything, and bank statements and things like that. So I kind of transitioned into that. So where there was a need, I just kind of learned. So I think one of the biggest things for me on my career path has been when I see something that is new and that I don't understand, I need to figure out how to understand that. And that could be taking a class, like taking college courses, which I have done quite a bit. I don't have a degree, but I've taken quite a few college courses, and, for my job. And learning on the job. There's a lot of learning on the job that I've done, because college courses are great to give you a basic understanding of what it is that you're looking at, and to give you more detail. But if you don't know what the company wants and how the company wants to implement it, you can't really put it into perspective for your job. So it's great to get like a background, but then once you actually start doing it is when you really start learning. I mean, you learn the basics, but then you go in and you learn how to do it the way the company wants you to do it. So anyway, that's what I started doing. I started working on the reports for the bank, and then they decided that they needed a full-time IT person. So I wanted to become the full-time IT person, so I took that position because I was already involved with quite a few things there anyway. If a computer broke, I knew how to fix it, so I would, put together parts and things like that. But this is way back when it was more wild, wild west. as opposed to today where you're required to have certain certifications before you can even step into anything like that. So it was a little bit different. But the biggest thing is if you can learn something, even on the job, like even at SOMAS, if I wanted to learn something, I would even volunteer my time just to learn it. So they might say, I could ask, you know, if I could work on a specific project, or maybe a server went down or something and I was just a systems admin. I would ask if I could stay. And if they said, well, no, we don't want to pay you for that, you know, we just want you to, you know, do your stuff. And then I could say, well, I would like to, you know, just see how it works. You don't have to pay me, and then do it that way. So I'm just learning as opposed to actually working it. But that's how I've gotten to where I'm at now. And I'm an enterprise network manager, which pretty much means I just do everything to do with the network. If there's any network problems, if there's anything that they want to plan out, if there's anything, any system thing that they want to add, they run it through me to make sure that everything will work together. It's mainly just everything communicating with each other. So that's, wow, that was really fast. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I actually transitioned from the bank, being their IT person, to another engineering firm that I was there for a short time because the bank actually went under. And then they were sold to another bank. And they were actually really good. They kept me on to map the data over and get everything set up to where the new bank could just take everything over seamlessly. But it was like a 6 or 8 month process, and then they gave bonuses at the end for staying on, which was really nice. But at the end of it, you know, I was laid off, and so I had to find another job, which I did like in a month. And from that engineering firm, we were going to be bought by another engineering firm. So this was a really weird situation. But they ended up backing out of the deal, like right at the end. But this was a really, really small company, and the other company was really large and had a lot more opportunity. And there were some other things going on in the background. And the company that I used to work for actually did end up selling because they really couldn't sustain themselves about a year or two later. So I ended up going with the new company, and it just worked that way. So like I said, my situation is unusual. It's not the standard, you know, where you go to college, you get your degree, you get all your certifications, and then you get the job. A lot of it had to do, for me, has been more on experience.
Tell me a little bit about your classes that you took. You said you took a lot of coursework, and what were they, and what else?
Oh my God.
Some of them.
I did. Well, I took Cisco. I took Cisco classes for networking. I took their Wi-Fi class as well. It was just whatever I ended up needing or what I figured I was going to be working on. I also took a security class. I'm trying to think of all of them. Those are really the main ones. The networking and security and VMware and firewall class from Cisco. That was actually another good one. You know what's really popular now, and a class that I'd be interested in taking is maybe some VMware, not VMware, SD-WAN. We use VeloCloud right now, and I've taken a Silver Peak class, and that was actually really interesting. But we ended up going with VeloCloud.
Can you explain what all the, I don't know anything about anything, what are all the?
Okay, SD-WAN is software defined wide area network. And what that is you have basic things in place. Like, I don't know if it probably haven't, you guys probably haven't heard of riverbeds or, oh, what do they call those? Or like WAN accelerators or anything like that, where they do compression in the background, and then they also cache files locally to like it's really more like a server, but it's treated kind of like a switch or a router. And that was the old riverbeds, where they would just house some of the data and actually download it and try to make it to where when you work on large files like engineering companies do for CAD drawings and things like that, it made it to where you didn't have to constantly copy files over to all the offices so that they could work on the files. Because when you have like a distance between offices, it causes latency, which means that it will be slower because of how far the packets have to travel. So when you have a situation like you have Salt Lake City and you have like Orange County trying to work off of these large files that are maybe in Orange County, it is a miserable experience for the user if they're trying to pull that data across the WAN. And back then, our WAN was only 3 megabytes per second, and we were the big office. So we had to find different ways that we could actually make things work. Now, of course, there's a lot more bandwidth. You know, you have like a minimum of 50 megs in an office, fiber both ways, and those are for the small offices. And then you also have a separate internet connection that's another 50 megs both ways. So there's plenty of bandwidth. But still, latency can be an issue with these large files that can be like gigs. So they're working on these drawings, and they need ways to be able to pull everything down and pull all the reference points down without it taking forever just to open the file. So SD-WAN, what that does is more like a router with some programming in it. So what it does is you have 2 lines coming in, let's say. You can have more than 2, but in a typical situation, you've got like 2 lines coming in. You have an internet line, or maybe 2 internet lines, I think, which is the direction everything is going in. Or you could have 1 internet line and a WAN line. And then you can have that come into this SD-WAN box, and then what it does is it says, okay, the bandwidth is looking good on both sides. Everything looks clear. And then we can, actually I can show you. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can share, yeah.
All right, let me pull something up first, and then I can show you what it looks like from the controller. So VeloCloud has a controller. Let me log into this real quick. And here we go. Let me share.
Working on the VeloCloud, I know we talked about that before, where everybody is pulling from the same space.
It's more like a WAN. It's more like just a wide area network that just connects everybody together. So you have the different offices, like we have all these different offices, and let's say we go to Santa Ana. You can see both of the lines, like we have a WAN line, which is our MPLS, and then we have a internet line. And in there, you can see what the bandwidth is. You can see what the throughput is. Whoa. Oh, it's not in live mode, that's why. So it'll tell you like what the throughput is here, like what's being used. And you can see like how much data is coming across. It really tells you a lot, but what it does is right here, you have your two lines. Now this one's saying it's getting, it's rated at like 9.97 quality, and quality drops when you get jitter, packet loss, or latency. Right now, everything is good. So here it shows this is rated at 10. Sometimes you can see these rated like 5 because the bandwidth connectivity is so bad. It could be just people working from one site that's really far, causing latency, and then coming in and then having to push out back to that same site, and that can cause issues. But what it does is it sees the problem in these two lines, and then it corrects it up here in the top line. So, and it tells you like for voice, for video, because there are different classifications, and it tells you for transactional as well. So it shows you.
Claudia, do you go in there and does it correct itself, or do you go in there and have to correct it manually?
It corrects itself. And it shows you, you know, it just gives you a quick graphical reading of what it's done. And you can look at your bandwidth, you can look at what the average throughput was, like how much bandwidth people were using. And it's really helpful. And then we have other tools where we can drill down even further, but not in the Velo Cloud. And you can see like exactly like what type of services that were being used. I mean, you can pinpoint who's pretty much doing what. And then the other thing too is, since this is a router, you set up all the routes and you set up everything in here. You can also get alerts, and then you can set up class of service, which is where is profiles. We look at branch. So business policy, which is what they call class of service. And then you can tell it like what's important, which is what the old riverbeds used to do. But you can give it the priority, you can tell it, do you use one path or the other? Do you use one line or the other? Or can they use both lines? Is it locked down, you know, to something specific? And then you can also tell it the service class, the priority, and then the network link. And then it can also just go by application because it knows a lot of the ports for different applications. So instead of like having to look up every single port for all of these, which in some cases like that, I had to. But sometimes you can just tell it, oh, no, this is what we're using for, this is what we're using for phone systems. So you can just pick that on up, and it'll know which ports to leave open for it. So that's kind of convenient. But
so how exactly does it clean up the latency issue? Does it cache data for you or something?
With the latency, that's a good question. I'm not even really sure, but it does, because it doesn't show, I mean, it doesn't show once it pulls it up. I know that if there are, if we're getting drop packets and things, it'll duplicate the packets. But like I said, you know, I'd be really interested in taking another class for the Velo Cloud on exactly how it's doing that. but it's supposed to do it all in the background and figure out when it needs to duplicate packets and push them out. Have you done it or had any experience with SD-WANs?
No, it was the first time I've ever heard of such a thing. As you were talking about, I'm thinking, what is she talking about? I haven't heard of this before.
Yeah, it started out with like ISPs, where they will do it, especially companies that provide WAN service, where they were just kind of doing it in the background, but now it's being rolled out to companies. We kind of adopted it. We were not the first adopters, because I really don't like being the first adopters, but we were kind of early in adopting it, and we put it off for a couple of years. But this is something that's really starting to take hold in at least the engineering industry.
Okay, so it's what the ISPs used to use to cheat their speeds, is what you're saying.
Kind of, yeah. But they still do it, and then you can also do it. And it helps. It helps when you're working on when you're working with large files. And it gives you easy class of service as far as programming for class of service, instead of having to know exactly how the switch requires it to be set up, and how, you know, the Cisco router has to be set up. This one's actually a little bit easier to implement.
So are you constantly like monitoring back and forth all these things?
Yeah, it's myself, and then I'm training a systems admin to help with that. But I tell you, with the SD-WANs, oh my God, outages are so much better. It's so much better, because if one line fails, it just fails over to the other one. So us having an actual office down is really, I mean, it was pretty rare before, but then we would get like somebody cutting through fiber, and then that would just take an office down on their WAN, and then you'd have to go through and change everything on the firewalls and set up a tunnel and then get that going. And a lot of times, if it wasn't cut fiber, if it was something else, like the ISP just programmed something wrong and then caught it and then fixed it, I would get to the end of finishing programming that tunnel and getting everything set up, and then they would say, oh, okay, it's up again. I'd be like, oh my God, okay, let me flip it back. So this is really nice.
So can you go through kind of like, do you have a typical day? Like what do you spend your time doing? Like what kind of, it's like what other?
Wow.
Pre-COVID, I guess. You're home now.
Well, even then, it's not really typical. I mean, I need to make sure that the things on the network are functioning properly. So I'll check this. I'll check our phone connectivity, like in the morning. Any issues that need to be addressed, which, you know, usually things pop up. And then the other thing too, with being on the network side, when things pop up on the system side, usually the network person gets involved, because the systems people a lot of times think that something's the network, when it a lot of times is the systems. So you have to prove to them that it's a system issue. So a lot of time is spent with that. Like if somebody has a CAD drawing that they don't want to clean up, and it's got a lot of references to things that don't really exist in our environment, because they got it from like a client, then you can kind of go back and forth. Like I spent 2 weeks going back and forth, showing them, taking snapshots from the switch, and then tracking down everybody's transactions going to this certain server when they'd open these CAD files because they didn't want to clean them up. And so finally, the CAD people and other people who had already been telling them, look, you need to clean up your CAD files, finally got through to them that, hey, you need to clean up your CAD files, run some Lisp routines and clean those up, you know, take the things out that aren't needed. So it doesn't take like, you know, 5-10 minutes to open a file. But, you know, it's kind of hard because sometimes things overlap, and sometimes, you know, I look at something, I'm like, that can't be a network issue. And then I'll go through and I'll trace things down. I'm like, oh my God, that was a network issue. And, you know, because sometimes things are, and they don't seem like they would be.
And I know that driving was a big part of what you were doing. You talk a little bit about, because you are going to the different offices.
Oh,
It's part of your
God, yeah, travel. My daily commute is usually, because of where I live, you know, it's usually 2.5 to 3 hours in a car. But I go to different offices. My main office is in Orange County and I live in Corona. But I have to fly up to like Walnut Creek or Roseville or Auburn. And if I have equipment, honestly, it's more convenient if I just drive up. It's not that bad. It's like a day's drive. And then I just do that and then do the installs. And then I can have my tools with me. And then I don't have to worry about the equipment getting damaged or my tools getting lost. And I've even driven out to Salt Lake before when I had to have equipment and tools with me. And same thing with Tucson. I have no problem driving out to Tucson. That's actually closer than driving up to Northern California. So a lot of times I prefer to drive just so that I can have my tools and my equipment with me rather than having to ship things around and then end up needing something, you know, once it's been shipped.
So what are your tools and equipment? What can you
What are
explain?
what?
What are your tools and equipment?
Oh, I have like a huge tool bag. It could be for like crimping cables, or, you know, because you run across things when you go to different sites. But mainly the equipment is usually switches or routers or like SD-WAN boxes, or right now our phone system, we have physical switches in the offices. We're going to be converting over to Teams, but we do currently have physical switches in the offices for our phone system. So I've had to swap those out before. Yeah, if I have to go and do like firmware upgrades. Oh, and firewalls, I've had to run around and swap out firewalls because Cisco had a clock chip that failed, and they knew it was going to fail, so they set up this whole program where they would eventually swap those firewalls out. And so I ended up having to do that. That was a few years ago. And I think one of them, or actually two of them, failed before we got the firewalls. So we were just running on WAN at that point and just forcing the internet through that. But as far as like the other, like crimping for cables, sometimes I have to run cable. If we have a construction site, because we have construction management as well, and we have survey. So we have different sites as well in Northern California. We have 12 offices, a data center, and a bunch of these little construction sites. So we have one even over in Beverly Hills where I set it up as mainly Wi-Fi. So I got these Ubiquiti Wi-Fi units, Unify Ubiquiti, which is actually really nice. I love the Wi-Fi units. And I had to just run cables up in the ceiling for that and get like a little switch and a router and just kind of set that up for like a little site. In Northern California, we're working at a DWP, like a water and power site. I don't know that it's DWP, but it's a water and power site. And so they had a trailer, like this big double wide trailer kind of thing. And so I had to run cable up through the ceiling and then down to a copier and get their copier set up to where it would, and to where they could send files directly from the copier and set up like an FTP site for them. So they could do that locally. So just different things like that. It could be just anything. I get requests for different things all the time, and I just need to figure out how to make it work. And a lot of times I look to my colleagues for experience in things like this, and other times I just go to Google. Because sometimes, you know, just nobody's had to do it before, you know, that I know. And so if you go to Google, a lot of times you can find answers for things. Or if you go, like if it's a Microsoft thing, I go to Microsoft support site and look it up there first. I would go there first. I always look for sites that are considered reputable, you know, like Microsoft, as far as Microsoft stuff, VMware, as far as VMware stuff, I look for the actual legit support sites first. If I can't find something there, then I start digging around other places. But
So it sounds like it's physical. You have a lot of physical aspects to it too. Are you under desks? You're up at ceilings and that kind of stuff?
yeah, I'm mostly at my desk, but there are times like this year, we were going to have 4 office moves. And because of the COVID-19, it knocked it down to 2. And I was like, oh, thank you. Because that's a lot of work. You know, you have to create the plans where, and I can show you, let me show you the plan. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yes.
All right, sorry. All right, stop share. But like here, Bluebeam. Let me share this. This is an office that we're working on right now. And let's see. Share. Okay. So like we get plans like this for a building, for an office, where this is what we plan on doing. We're going to build out these walls. We're going to put all these cubicles in, and we're going to do all this, you know, stuff. And it's going to be a really neat, cool looking office. We want to put, you know, microphones and speakers in the ceilings. And that is something that we're looking at this year to start doing. So that's actually going to be kind of cool. So that's kind of the fun part of it, when you get to plan some of this stuff out. So they're setting up like a TV here. We're going to have microphones and speakers in the ceiling, which we don't have that on this plan yet. This is just what we spec'd out for like where we want Wi-Fi units and where we want floor cores, and you know, here we want like 4 Ethernet ports. This is a quad, you know, electrical. So I've got to do these drawings so I can make sure that the outlets are in the correct place. The cabling for the cubicles are in the correct place. And then I've got to do, you know, like a little legend and give them a count of however many outlets that we have.
So are you working with some students, or this is your drawings, you're doing everything, and then you're...
No. We get the drawings from the building. So the
Okay.
building does the main CAD drawings.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, like the only CAD drawings that I have to do are for like the server room, the switch room, the stuff that is IT related. Other than that, I just mark all this other stuff up, like all the colored stuff is me. That's what I marked up. Anything that's black and white on here, I did not mark up. That's the drawing that they sent us. So, you know, like I have to tell them, you know, this is counter height, because I'm working with our facilities guy. So I put in the electrical for his stuff too. And he tells me he's putting counters in and that kind of thing, and we need this counter height. And I'm like, okay, so I'll mark that on my drawing for the electrical for counter height. I have to calculate for the computer equipment. I have to calculate like BTUs, British thermal units for air conditioning, and electrical requirements for like each computer device, like a workstation, server, switches, anything that's in the server room. For like a CAD drawing, oh, here we go. Like we have this is our IT lab, which is not really that exciting because this isn't where like the servers and the switches go. This is just like, we wanted a countertop to work on. We want to be able to have these outlets here. And then we have, we need the floor grounded so that we're not, shuffling our feet and putting static on the chips and stuff when we're working on things. Let's see, there is another drawing that I can show you for the server room, and that's got a little more server room. Okay, let me, oh, this is covering it.
Figuring out all the installs on these?
Do what?
Are you doing all the installments of all this equipment to go in, or you tell them what you want?
Okay, so for the network equipment, it's me, and I have somebody helping me. For the server equipment, it's our server manager. For the actual racks and all the other equipment that we're loading that stuff into is the cable vendor. So, and the Wi-Fi units, I have him hang the Wi-Fi units. Unless I have to go around and switch everything out, then that's me. But if I have something installed from like a move, then I have the cable vendor do it, because it's just, he's already there anyway. The labor is going to be cheaper because he's already getting up there to run the cable. So it makes more sense. All right, so let me rotate. There we go. Okay. All right, so here, let me see, I should be able to. So here, like this is a server room. We have to have like a backboard, it's gotta be grounded, we've gotta have like a grounding bush bar, the building has to have the electrician like run the ground to like a beam that's going down into the ground, like literally going down into the ground, so that we don't, have a lot of electrostatic discharge. And we have the floor grounded, and the ground runs over to the racks. The cable vendor grounds the racks. So here we're having like a 4-post rack here for our servers, and then we have a 2-post rack here at the back of the 4-post rack, so we can easily trace cables. That's something that I just started doing like in the last couple moves that we had. So that's kind of nice when you're trying to trace cables, because the old way that we were doing it was up in the front. The switch rack was up in the front with the server rack, and so you would have to go behind and then pull on cables and try to figure out where they were going, like, is this one going here? And it would be so easy to get it confused because there are so many cables. So now with this design, where the front of the 2-post rack is at the back of the 4-post rack, you just have shorter cables, shorter runs between the two, and it's all like right there. So it makes it easy. Let's see. And that's kind of it. I mean, I have to spec out where the floor cores are going to be, and where the, so that they can actually run cable down through the floor, and where it is in the ceiling. And then sometimes you spec out a floor core and they can't do it because they x-ray the floor, and there's something there where they can't drill. Some of them are tension rods, so if they go down and they drill through a tension rod, it could just make the whole floor collapse. So That could be dangerous. I was only there for one where I had to supervise a floor core. I was so nervous. Oh my God. The facilities guy was not there. And they were asking me if I was going to catch the core down below. And I'm like, no, no, you need to have somebody come over and catch that core.
How heavy is it? How big is it?
Oh, I had to make the cores. Like, wait, let me get off of this drawing stuff. I had to make the cores like, they're like that. They're like 8-inch cores. And so they didn't have tension rods in these floors, so it was okay, but it was in like a remote place that's up in the mountains and up in Northern California, and it was just like everybody was really, really casual, and it just really made me nervous. Because, and apparently there was another guy coming to catch the floor core, but they stand under it. They've got this big machine and they drill out this hole in the floor. And then a guy goes underneath, to the floor below, pops out a ceiling tile and holds a bucket up to where the core is going to come out. And he catches it. They stand on a ladder, hold a bucket. That's how you catch a floor core.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you I don't know if we have any questions, Mr. Davis, or any of the students have any questions for Claudia at this point. Otherwise, I have a couple more questions myself. Anybody?
I think they all went away. I don't see anyone.
Visible, so we don't know. They could be empty chairs right now. We don't know. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, like, what's your favorite part? Oh, go ahead.
Just to let you know, a lot of times, although they aren't doing it right now, the kids will respond by chat rather than by microphones. So if you have a chat window open, sometimes
we do. I do have a chat.
For instance, one of my students just said no questions, but he said on the chat.
Yes, I see that. Thank you. But so Claudia, what's your kind of favorite thing about the job, and maybe not so, like, what do you not like about it?
Probably my favorite thing is, I would say, planning the moves or working on a specific project. Like right now, I'm planning to move and I'm working on transitioning our phones from like a ShoreTel system over to Microsoft Teams. And that's exciting because I get to plan all of that out. I had a vendor that I did a proof of concept with. We're still not quite sure which direction we want to go with the routing for the phones. But it's fun to do that and then to get everything prepared because I'm kind of a geek, so I like to plan things out and put things in spreadsheets and do all of that. And it also helps you see, like, if you're missing a step or if there's something that you didn't think of. When you're looking at it on paper, you see and you go back to it, like you put it down on paper, you're like, okay, that's good. And then you go back to it and you're like, oh my God, I totally didn't even think about these 3 things. And then you can add things back in. But to me, that's fun. Doing the planning for a project. I really like project management. It's stressful when you're working with vendors and having to coordinate time. To me, that's probably one of the most stressful things, because when you're working on something yourself, you know what time you have and you know how long it's going to take you to do something if you've done it before. Or if you haven't done it before, once you plan it out on paper, you have a good idea of how long it's going to take, and you give yourself a little bit of extra time, a little bit of wiggle room just in case you need it. And you have a fallback plan if something doesn't work. So when you're working with vendors, you don't know first off, how much time they have to devote to a project, and also what their time scale is. Like, well, they can't work on this with you because they're working on another project over here. Like our door answering system that I had to put in. It's so that there's a video camera at the door, and then there's an intercom and all of that. I had to work with the vendor on that. They had to come in, do the cabling, then they came back and to do the install. Well, their install didn't work. And so, you know, I've got to coordinate this time. And then also if it's in another office, which it usually is, I've got to travel out there and then just make sure that I'm there. So if they have questions or they need help or there's something on the network that needs to be looked at, I am available and I can see what they're doing as well. So I can kind of see if something's going south. So like in our San Diego office, we had this door system put in. And it was a different door system than we normally put in. It's the same manufacturer, but a different model. And it was so different that the way that they wanted the vendor to do the programming for it was buggy. This application that they had to use was buggy. They would go in and make a change on one thing and it would change something else. And I thought the vendor was blaming the application for a while because I'm thinking, yeah, maybe he's just really tired because, you know, God knows if he was working all night and then came in and had to work on my project. So this project should have taken like 2-3 days tops. It ended up taking a lot longer because there was a lot more troubleshooting. And at the end of it, I was sitting with him, like at the last day, I was sitting with him and we were both working on it. And I had no experience with it until I saw what he was showing me. You know, but again, this is how you get your experience and you know, just kind of being thrown on the fire is where you learn a lot of things when things don't work. But it, like I said, it gives you more experience. So finally, the vendor wasn't really, not the vendor, but the actual manufacturer wasn't acknowledging this issue. So I had to lodge a complaint with the manufacturer being the actual client and got a workaround from them to where I could program the individual devices themselves as opposed to using this programming tool that they were trying to make the vendors use. But you run into things like that. I mean, the vendor itself was actually pretty good. I mean, they were good. They were trying. They were working with something buggy. Other times you have like people like, oh yeah, I can't work this project, you know, at this time. I'm going to have to do it at another time. And then that may push out your timeline for other things as well, because you have like a bunch of different vendors that you're trying to coordinate. So, you know, you communicate as best you can and try to get everybody in the loop, you know, from the get-go. But sometimes it, you know, things happen. Yeah. But that's I think the most frustrating part for me.
So what would you say skills are needed for like working in your field? What, as far as soft skills, are there any soft skills in particular that you really should have to be successful?
What do you mean?
Soft skills, like you know, you have to be good with this. Like, are you working with people? Do you have to be good?
Okay.
Like that kind of stuff.
Okay. I mean, having a general, you've got to be able to work with people and you've got to be able to explain things in a way that people understand them. I think that's important because you need to be able to communicate with management that doesn't necessarily have an IT background or maybe has a systems background and doesn't understand networking. So you need to be able to communicate and show proof of things that are happening. So you need to be able to pull data from, you know, areas where you can show people, look, this is what's happening. You need to be able to write procedures. So if something happens, I mean, if you set something up, which happens a lot, and you don't have to touch that thing for like a year or two, and you have to come back to it, you may not remember how you set it up. So you have to know how to write a procedure that you can go back to and be able to follow. Step-by-step procedures, being able to write those are really, really key And then two, if you have to write a procedure for a user, like how to change your voicemail or how to, like with Microsoft Teams, they have a lot of things out there, but they don't have everything, like the backgrounds. There was like a big kick now that Microsoft Teams allows backgrounds, and you can actually upload them to your upload folder under your profile, under your roaming profile. So, you know, at our company, everybody's geeking out. They're going, oh yeah, we need to have our background. So they created a background for our company. And I had to write 2 procedures last night, one for Zoom and one for Teams, so that they would know how to change their background. So, you know, when they're on these conference calls with clients, that they can go in and do that.
Are you talking about a background with a logo on the back?
I'm talking like the background I have up right now.
Oh, so they wanted, oh, okay.
Yeah, but on the company one, it has like the name. And then there was one thing where Zoom will let you unmirror, like they have the mirror checkbox for your backgrounds. But Teams doesn't, so it was showing up backwards. I was like going, oh my God, test with me really quick. And so we tested it, and everyone else sees it, you know, forward, but then when you look at it in Teams, the wording is backward when you're the one presenting, but everyone else sees it correctly. But you don't know that.
Crazy. I did want to mention that on a computer, I know I was looking at, there's a really great website, I just sent it to everybody, that has information about all kinds of different careers. Computer networking is one of the higher paid careers in computer science field. The average wage, according to that website I just posted, the bls.gov /OOH is the Occupational Outlook Handbook, is about $56 an hour in the Los Angeles area, and that translates to about $116,000 a year. I know with Claudia, you have a really interesting kind of work your way up thing, but it does usually say that a bachelor's degree is required for this particular career. And again, with Claudia's case, it worked out, but she obviously had a lot of coursework in college to prepare for what she does, and learning on the job is so important no matter what degree you have for what job. It's a lot about learning on the job too. So please go to that website and take a look at the different careers, and there's a whole bunch of careers in the computer science pathway on that website. And if, let's see, anything else, Claudia, you want to add?
This is a career where you get to learn new things all the time. So if you enjoy learning new things, if you become a network analyst or a network manager or anything like that, or an architect where you get to plan everything out, I kind of do all of that stuff. But with anything tech related, new things come out all the time, and sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not, and you get to kind of field out the good stuff from the bad stuff, and you get to learn things all the time. So that's just one thing to be prepared for. It can be great, but it can also be like, oh my God, this is overwhelming, when it's a lot of it all at once. But for the most part, I think it's good.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions in the future, you can always let me know. I can send it on over to Claudia to answer your questions. But take a look. This is one option of many in this field, in the career, I guess, computer science field. And just let me know. All right.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis, you have anything else to say? You're good?
No, nothing from here. Nothing from me.
All right. Thank you so much. All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.